Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon spoilers video. So we recently got shown a couple of cards from BT07, and BT07 is going to be about Digimon Frontiers, and it's going to focus on hybrids along with a couple of other cards and other themes. But it seems like that hybrids was one of the focus, and we're getting a whole lot of new hybrids and cards around the Frontiers season of Digimon, and it's looking to be a pretty exciting and interesting set based on what we have revealed so far. So going over some of the spoilers, we got a image leaked of all of the Frontier Tamers, so we don't know exactly all of their abilities, we know some of them, but we do know where they're going to fall, and we can kind of decipher a general pattern on what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be behaving. So we know that Takuya is going to be in red, we know that Zoe is going to be in yellow, we know that Tommy is going to be in blue, we know Junpei is going to be in green, we know Kochi is going to be in blue, and we know Koichi is going to be in purple. So the only one that's missing is Black. Black didn't get their own tamer for the hybrids, but Black got their own tamer for something else, which we'll see later in the video. So as much as it is disappointing to see that there's not going to be a hybrid in Black, at least not at this current time, because, you know, color shifts could happen, but at least they are getting some tamer, and it'll be interesting to see how they color balance their set and where their color distributions lie, considering usually in the past they don't bother color balancing their sets at all. So to start off the spoilers, let's start off with Orochimon. So Orochimon is a new purple level 5 Digimon, so Orochimon is making the color shift, and Orochimon has the stat line where it's 8 to hard play, 3 to Evo off of a purple Digimon, and 8000 DP. And then Orochimon has 2 abilities, one native to itself, and then another an inheritable. So the ability native to itself is when you discard this card from your hand due to your own card effects, then you get to draw 1 card. So this is pretty good considering it's essentially replacing itself as long as you're using it as discard fodder, which as we saw with BT06, there's a lot of discard synergies, so it'll be rather easy to fit this card into the current archetype of discarding and drawing. So I really like that aspect of this card, and it also has a really nice inheritable ability where it's playing with that theme even more, where it's giving the Digimon it's digivolving into the when attacking ability. Once per turn, you get to discard 1 card from your hand to gain 1 memory. So that's already looking to be pretty good, considering if you discard Orochimon, then you get to draw 1 card, and then off of the inheritable, gain 1 memory. It is once per turn, so if your Digimon can multi-swing, it doesn't really matter. But the fact that you have an additional way of gaining memory that fits on theme with what BT06 was doing is really nice, and it's going to increase the overall power of that subtype or strategy for what Purple is doing, and I'm looking forward to see how something like this is implemented. Next, we have Nidhoggmon. So we have a new version of Nidhoggmon who's also making the color shift from green to purple, and this time Nidhoggmon is continuing to play with the discard sub-theme for what Purple's been playing around with, and we could see it with its 2 abilities. So its first ability is a when discarding ability, where when you discard this card due to the effects of your own card effects, then you get to gain 1 memory. So it's doing something very similar to Orochimon, where when it's discarded, you gain a benefit, and the benefit is gaining a memory, which is pretty good considering gaining a memory is usually really powerful, considering there's just a lot that you could do with that extra memory depending on where the game state is. And then on top of that, it also has a when digivolving ability where you get to discard a card from your hand to delete 1 of the opponent's level 4 or below Digimon. So this is pretty decent considering it's just a very stereotypical removal type ability that's playing on theme with what Purple's been playing around with. I don't know exactly how good this card is going to be in the long run, considering it does look to be like it's an uncommon, so it's not necessarily meant to be super powerful, but the fact that it is playing around with all of those synergies means you could really make it an interesting deck out of it, and you could at worst still utilize this for the discard ability that it has to just gain a memory. So it is looking to be a unique card with a lot of different applications. Next up, we have Bukamon. So we get a new version of Bukamon in the set. So Bukamon is a blue level 2 Digimon with the inheritable ability of during your turn, once per turn, when your Digimon is played from your Digimon's inheritable sources, then you get to gain 1 memory. So this type of ability really encourages separating the stack. So we saw that blue kind of plays around with separating the stack here and there. So we had Metal Garurumon all the way back in BT01, where it has the when attacking ability to separate its stack. We had Leopardmon in BT03, when digivolving you could separate the stack. And then we have a couple of other cards like Kaiser Nail that also just allow you to separate the stack, and this just makes those types of abilities that much more efficient because you're going to be gaining the memory for doing that. So it's really interesting to see where blue is going to be going in this set, just because we know that is going to be the sub-theme that they're going to be playing around with, or at least one aspect of the sub-theme that they're going to be playing around with. So I'm curious to see where they go with it, but regardless, it's looking like it's going to be a really interesting ability to be utilizing, considering it is a very underutilized aspect, and they're playing around with what you could do with your inheritable sources more and more, which is really nice because we get to flesh out all of the possibilities that that type of mechanic can bring. Next up, we have a new Vitramon, or Burning Greymon in English. So this is looking to be an interesting card, considering he has 2 abilities native to him, and he's got some pretty interesting stat lines where he hard plays for 6. It looks like he could Evo for 3 off of a level 3 Digimon, or Evo for 1 off of a level 4 Digimon. That's just what I can gather based on what the card is doing, considering he is a red level 4. Can't really exactly see for sure what it's doing, considering the image is a little bit blurry, but that's just my guesstimation. And he's got 6,000 DP, so the 6,000 DP is basically the same as what he was doing before. And he's got 2 abilities of his own. So this Digimon can Evo off of a red tamer for 2. So he has a plethora of different ways you could Evo him, and that's just making him be very, very powerful. He's probably going to end up replacing a Agunimon in a lot of decks, just because his first ability is the same as Agunimon's, and Agunimon was already looking to be pretty good, but the fact that this card has more flexibility than Agunimon makes him even better. And then on top of that, he has a when digivolving ability, where if this Digimon has a hybrid type Digimon or Takuya in its inheritable source, then it gets to destroy one of the opponent's Digimon with 4,000 DP or less. So this is looking to be a pretty decent removal ability that you could utilize very efficiently based on all of the different ways you could digivolve it, and I'm really liking what this card is doing. Next, we have Entelamon. So Entelamon is making the color shift from yellow to purple, and stats-wise, it's not really doing anything too interesting. 6 to hard play, 3 to Evo, 7,000 DP, and it has a really interesting when digivolving ability, where you get to play a purple tamer that costs 3 or less from your trash for free. So we haven't really seen much interaction with tamers before, and we do have a couple of cards that interact with tamers, but nothing too crazy. So the fact that we now have a card that allows us to interact with our tamers that are in our trash is really interesting, considering purple just likes to discard cards anyway and fill up their trash as much as possible. So this is just utilizing the cards in your trash in a new meaningful way, because you really didn't have a way to interact with your tamers in your trash before for purple, and now you're getting that ability to do that, which may or may not be really good. I think for the hybrids, it's definitely going to be really good, but who's to say this can't be utilized in some other meaningful ways. Next up, we have a new Metal Greymon. So this new Metal Greymon is looking to be pretty good, considering he has 2 abilities. His first ability, which is native to him, is an on-play ability, where if you have a tamer in play, then you get to gain 2 memory. And then if you don't have a tamer in play, then you get to play a red tamer card from your hand for free. So this is really good considering it's always really powerful to be able to play your tamers as efficiently as you possibly can. So at worst, if you already have a tamer on your field, then playing Metal Greymon will just mean that he's a level 5 that you're hard playing for 5, which is on the more efficient side. Granted, yes, it is gaining the memory, so if the opponent does have a way to block you from gaining memory, then you do have to keep that in mind. But regardless, if they don't, level 5's hard playing for 5 is just really good. And then if you don't have a tamer in play, then he's just allowing you to play your tamer for free, and it's not restricted to any play cost. So if they do end up creating more powerful tamers that cost more, then this Metal Greymon can get those out for free as of right now based on this translation. So that's just really powerful of a thing to be doing already. And on top of that, he even has another ability where during your turn, once per turn, when one of your opponent's Digimon is deleted, then you get to gain 1 memory. So this is just a really good ability just because Red has a whole lot of ways of deleting the opponent's Digimon, and they have some of the best removal in the game. So making those cards more efficient thanks to Metal Greymon's inheritable ability is looking to be really, really good, especially since you could combo it with a whole bunch of different cards and decks that we already have. So one of the big things that you could do is hard play this Metal Greymon. You then could play a tamer for free, and then the following turn, you could even go into Alteris mode. Alteris mode could delete a Digimon that's 4000 DP or less, thanks to it being a Metal Greymon that it's Digivolving on top of, and then you're going to be gaining the memory back for deleting that Digimon, which basically meant that you Digivolved for free. So that's just a really powerful level of synergy, and that's just on a very basic level. So I'm really excited to see what other people can do with this card, and how this card is going to be implemented considering all of the decks that this can go into. Next, we have a new version of Were-Garurumon. So this Were-Garurumon is basically doing almost the exact same thing as the Metal Greymon in terms of how this card is being played. So it has an on-play ability where if you have a tamer in play, then you get to gain 2 memory. Otherwise, you get to play a blue tamer from your hand for free, which again is pretty good for all the same reasons why I laid out with Metal Greymon. And then his inheritable ability is a little bit different, where it's a during your turn, once per turn, when this Digimon is unsuspended during the main phase, then you get to gain 1 memory. So unsuspending your Digimon is just a very classical blue thing to do, and it's always nice to see the consistency in the types of abilities that we have, so that way we could figure out how much of this ability we want to see, how much we want to utilize, or we get to pick and choose which of the tools with the same abilities that we want to utilize based on other things and other aspects of what the card is doing, like stats and other abilities. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card considering a lot of the Garurumon synergy does like to focus around multi-attacking and unsuspending, and there's just a lot of decent blue cards that just already interact with unsuspending as a whole. So it'll be interesting to see how they utilize this card, if they're going to be utilizing it, but I think just that first part of the ability, its on-play ability, is just really, really strong, just being able to play your tamers as efficiently as possible. So I'm just curious to see where the set is going to go with it and how it's going to be implemented with the rest of the cards. Next up, we have Waymon. So Waymon is looking to be a pretty interesting Digimon to be utilizing. Stats aren't really doing anything too interesting. He does have a play cost of 8, and that's interesting to note considering he does have a on-play ability. So usually I would have expected him to have a play cost of 7. Just so it makes the on-play ability easier, but the on-play ability must be really good if they're upping the cost of his play cost. So what his on-play ability is doing is you may play 1 level 3 Digimon from one of your Digimon's Digivolution sources as another Digimon, so he's just another card to separate your Digivolution source stacks, which is pretty interesting considering we knew that they would probably be playing around with this sub-theme a little bit more, and Waymon is looking to be one of those cards to interact with that type of ability. And on top of that, if you do separate a Digimon, then you get to place one blue Digimon card from your hand to the bottom of one of your Digimon's Digivolution sources. So this is just really interesting of an ability. Not only is it separating your Digivolution stacks, it's also replacing cards or adding cards into your evolution stacks. So it seems like what it wants to be doing is you have a separate stack already on the field, hard play Waymon, separate that stack, and then you could utilize Waymon to then put another card, either replacing the one you just separated or trying to put it underneath Waymon or the card you just separated with. So there's just a ton of different things you could do with this card. It is a little bit unfortunate that he does hard play for 8, but you do get a level 3 body and you get a new inheritable source underneath one of your Digimon. So it's really interesting to see how powerful this card could be. I just, again, don't know, given the context of where the state of the game is, if that's going to be a really good thing to do or not. But it seems interesting that they are playing around with the idea and mechanic of separating your inheritable sources more and more. Next up, we have Rasenmon. So Rasenmon is a yellow level 6 Digimon. He hard plays for 11, evos for 5, which is rather expensive considering he only has 11,000 DP. Usually when a Digimon evos for 5, naturally they'll usually have higher DP, but that's okay considering he has an ability that could reduce his Digivolution cost, where his ability states that the Digivolution cost of this card is equal to the number of cards in your security stack with a minimum cost of 1. So at worst, he's going to be evoing for 5, potentially more, but obviously if you're going to be focused around increasing your security as often as possible, he might not be the most ideal card, but at best, he's going to cost 1 to evo into a level 6, and that could be really, really powerful, considering he also has a really nice main ability where once per turn, you get to use Digiburst up to 4, so you get to trash up to the number of Digivolution sources required to activate the ability. So the fact that you get to choose how much you want to Digiburst is really powerful, considering the Digiburst ability that you're utilizing is one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 3,000 DP for each of the card trashed by this ability. So this is just really good considering it could just act as some pretty decent removal where you just Digiburst a whole bunch of your sources away to just utilize this ability over and over again, and that's just really, really powerful. Minus DP stacks, and that could be utilized in various different ways. So I think Rasenmon is going to be a really fun Digimon to be playing around with. I don't know how powerful he's going to be in the long run or the grand scheme of things, but he seems really fun and interesting to use just because he's doing some very different things that we haven't really seen in the game before. Next up, we have Ebonwumon. So Ebonwumon is another Digimon Sovereign. So we had Azulongmon in the previous set, now we have Ebonwumon here. So I don't know if we're going to get any more Sovereigns in this set or if they're just going to slowly release them one per set. That's to be determined, but regardless, it's nice to see another Sovereign, and we could kind of decipher a little bit of a pattern between the two Sovereigns that we have, where they have a very similar stat line, where they hard play for 13, evo for 5, have 13,000 DP, so they're rather strong Digimon, and they each have a when Digivolving ability that could mitigate the fact that they evo for 5, and Azulongmon had his that interacted with the opponent's Digimon not having any Digivolution sources, and Ebonwumon is interacting with the fact that he is suspending one of the opponent's Digimon down, and then you gain a memory for each of the opponent's suspended Digimon. So that's kind of like how he's mitigating his evo for 5. So at worst on base, he's going to actually evo for 4 because he's suspending at least one of the opponent's Digimon down, and then you're going to gain that one memory back. So it's not actually reducing his evolution, it's just gaining the memory, which is important to note in case you're running up against any memory blocking Digimon that prevent you from gaining memory. So just keep that in mind. But regardless, it's still a very powerful ability to have because the more Digimon the opponent has on the field suspended, then the easier it is to Digivolve into Ebonwumon and gain the memory back for Digivolving up into him. And then what's even crazier about this card is how strong his second ability is, where during the opponent's turn, all of the opponent's Digimon gain the ability where this Digimon can't unsuspend unless you trash one card from your hand. So this is another form of hand disruption that we have in the game. The first time we saw anything that's interacting with the opponent's hand, it was on Devimon, and that was paired with an on-delete ability where they have to discard 2 cards, but in order to actually utilize their Digimon and unsuspend them, then the opponent's going to have to trash 1 card from their hand for each of the Digimon. So if they have, let's just say, 3 Digimon, then in order to use all 3 of them, they're going to have to discard 3 cards from their hand. And that could be some really powerful level of disruption and a way to keep the opponent's Digimon down because they might not want to discard cards from their hand, thus making this card really, really good. Green already has a ton of ways of resting the opponent's Digimon down, so one of the best ways that I can think of utilizing this card as of right now is just using Lilamon to just Digiburst, rest one of the opponent's Digimon down, Digivolve into Ebonwumon. Then Ebonwumon's when Digivolving ability will suspend another one of their Digimon down if they have multiple Digimon on the field, and then you're going to be gaining 2 memory back, so it's only like he evoed for 3, and then they're going to have to discard 2 cards from their hand if they want to use the Digimon that you just rested. So he is just acting as a really powerful control type tool for Green to be playing around with, and Green kind of needed this considering in the last set Green really wasn't doing a whole lot in BT06, so it's nice to see that Green is getting some really strong cards in this set. Next up, we have Dorumon. So Dorumon is looking to be a pretty decent Digimon, stat-wise not doing anything too special, but he does have 1000 DP, so that is kind of important to keep in mind because 1000 DP versus 2000 DP makes him susceptible to almost every form of removal, so he is slightly weaker, but that weakness does come at the cost of having 2 pretty decent abilities. One ability is native to himself, where it's an on-play ability, where you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 Digimon with X-Antibody in its type, and 1 Kota from among them into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So he is just your stereotypical digger, where he's looking for X-Antibody typed Digimon and the tamer he's supposed to be interacting with, so that's just already pretty decent considering consistency is a huge aspect of Digimon. And on top of which, he also has a inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when you place a card underneath this Digimon's Digivolution source, then you get to gain 1 memory. So it looks like the Dorumon line is going to be interacting with the ability to place cards underneath his inheritable sources, so that's already looking to be pretty good considering we have a ton of really good black inheritable sources we could be interacting with, and it'll be interesting to see what the X-Antibody type Digimon are going to be doing. The really powerful aspect of Dorumon is it's not color locking the X-Antibody type Digimon, so the more X-Antibody type Digimon we get, the more powerful this card is going to become in the future, so it'll be interesting to see how he plays out and what this card is going to be doing and the line that he's going to be interacting with. Next, we have Dorugoramon. So Dorugoramon is looking to be the level 6 that follows the same type of synergies that the Dorumon line is going to be playing around with. So the Dorumon line does have a couple of divergence. It could go into Alphamon, and now it could go into Dorugoramon. So Dorugoramon is looking to be pretty powerful stat-wise, not doing anything too interesting. 11 to hard play, 3 to Evo, 11,000 DP, very stereotypical, but he does have 2 abilities that make him really decent. So his first ability is during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP for every Digivolution source that he has underneath him with X-Antibody in its type. So the more X-Antibody Digimon he has underneath, the stronger he'll get. So if you follow his whole line, ideally he should gain about 3000 extra DP just on base, just because the level 3, the level 4, and the level 5 should all be X-Antibody. So that plus 3000 DP is actually going to be making him a 14k body, which is pretty good. And then on top of that, he has a when attacking ability. Once per turn, you get to place 1 Digimon with X-Antibody from its type in your hand underneath this Digimon, and then if you do, you get to delete up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon with play cost equal to or less than the number of Digivolution sources underneath this card. So it looks like Black just wants to build this one super stacked Digimon and utilize a whole bunch of X-Antibody type Digimon, and Black is interacting with removal more and more. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting card to be playing around with. Again, I don't know how good things are going to be in the grand scheme of things, but you could utilize this in some very interesting ways. So one of the interesting things that you could be possibly doing with this card, based on what information we have right now, is that you could pair him up with Megadramon, and then Megadramon can give him blocker. He's going to add inheritable sources with X-Antibody underneath him, so that way he can make himself even stronger. Then pair him up with Craniamon, so that way Craniamon can make it so he can't be deleted by card effects, thus adding some protection to him. And then on top of that, you even have potential Royal Knight synergy that you could be interacting with, just because you also could be playing Alphamon in the deck, just because Alphamon is also an X-Antibody type Digimon and is very strong and powerful in his own right. That could also be searched off of Dorumon. So there's just a whole bunch of different things that you could do with this card based on the types of synergies and interactions that you want to be playing around with. And I think he's going to be a pretty fun card to be playing around with, just because of all of that flexibility. And because he is also playing with X-Antibody type Digimon that isn't color locked, there's also just more possible room for him to grow in the future and be a really powerful card. Next up, we have Aizmon. So Aizmon is going to be a purple level 4 Digimon, and what this Digimon is doing is he has two abilities where when you trash this card from your hand using your card effects, then if you have a Aizmon scatter mode in your trash, then you get to play that Digimon for free. So that's just really good, and it means that we're going to be getting an Aizmon scatter mode in the set, so that's something exciting to look forward to, considering he is going to be continuing to play with discard synergy. So it's looking like this is going to be a great discard engine to be playing around with, just because there's a whole bunch of benefits to be gaining off of discarding these cards, and then on top of all of the other discard synergies that we have in the game already. And then on top of which, he also has another ability where during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP for each Aizmon scatter mode in your trash. So this is just looking to be a pretty decent card to be playing around with overall, considering it seems like you want to be discarding Aizmon scatter mode for a really good discard fodder to get it in the trash, and then Aizmon, if it's ever discarded, brings it back, and while they're in the trash, he's gaining plus 2000 DP, which means he's a level 4. That'll be swinging for 7000 DP, potentially more, which is already looking to be very good and very powerful. And I'm really excited to see what Aizmon Scatter Mode is going to be doing, along with what the rest of the purple cards are going to be doing, because who knows, purple seems to be doing 3 different things in the set, split between the new hybrids it's going to be getting, Aizmon and the discard synergy, and then you also have Intilamon and Tamer interactions. So I think like Telamon and Tamer interactions is going to be playing very nicely with the hybrids, but who's to say how the cards are actually going to be used once they're all out, and we are working with incomplete information, so it'll be interesting to see how these cards are actually going to be utilized when the full set is released. Next up, we have Cherubimon. So Cherubimon is making the color shift from yellow to purple, which makes sense considering this is the evil version of Cherubimon that was seen in the anime and in the Digimon movie. So it's looking to be a really powerful Digimon. Stat-wise, it's very classical stat line, 13 to hard play. That's a little bit on the high side, but not like uncommonly seen. It also has an Evo for 4, and because it has an Evo for 4, it has 12,000 DP, so it's, again, just a very solid stat line that we've seen a couple of times before, and it has 2 very powerful abilities. So its first ability is a when Digivolving ability, where you get to play 1 purple tamer from your trash for free, and then for each tamer you have in play, you get to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So again, this is just playing with the same type of theme that Intilamon was playing around with, where the idea is it's just rezzing your purple tamers, and then it is acting as some really decent removal for each of the tamers you have in play. So I can guess that this is going to line up very nicely with the purple hybrid stuff, considering the hybrids also want to be interacting with tamers, and the removal off of Cherubimon just seems pretty decent for a wide board. So I really like that aspect of the card. And then on top of that, he even has a really decent on-deletion ability, where for each tamer you have in play, you get to play one level 3 Digimon from your trash for free. So this is just really good considering when he gets deleted, he basically can spawn a small army of Digimon based on how many tamers you have in play, and that could be a really good aggro push to help close out the game because they might not be wanting to delete Cherubimon in fear of the small army that you could be spawning, and then you could pair this up with a whole bunch of other cards like Anubismon to give all of the cards that you're spawning rush in case you are just trying to swing with it, and then he does die in security from a security check. So that's just one possible line of play that you could be utilizing him for. But the other big aspect to his on-deletion ability is the fact that the level 3 Digimon that you're going to be rezzing are not color locked, and you do get their on-play abilities. So this is just really powerful considering there's a lot of really good Digimon that he could res because there's just a lot of Digimon with solid on-play abilities. So one of the biggest ones that I can think of is going to be Lucemon. And then on top of all that, you could pair him up with a whole bunch of other different color combinations depending on what you feel like. So we do know that, as an example, Megidramon is a purple-red Digimon, so you could splash in a little bit of red cards to play a Gallantmon package because you have the Guilmon that could warp into Gallantmon. So that's just also a really interesting line of play that you could think about pairing him up with. So there's just a lot of possible things that you could do with this card, making him just a really strong card to be playing around with as a whole. Next up, we have Takuya. So Takuya is looking to be a really interesting tamer card considering he is the first tamer card we have seen with an inheritable ability. So ordinarily where his inheritable ability is where the security ability is, but they just move that up at the top by actually giving him a security ability where you get to play the card for free. So, you know, just your very classic tamer type ability. And then on top of which he also has a main ability where once per turn, you get to place 5 cards with hybrid in their form from your trash under this tamer in any order to digivolve him into a Kaiser Greymon in your hand by paying its Digivolution cost as if this card was a level 5 red Digimon. So we are going to be getting a Kaiser Greymon in the set, so that's going to be really exciting. We already knew that Susamon was coming, so it's not like it wasn't unprecedented that Kaiser Greymon wouldn't make an appearance, but how he's making an appearance is looking to be pretty spicy, considering he's just putting cards literally underneath him in order to prep him for a Kaiser Greymon. So that's just really powerful, considering he basically could build whatever stack he wants out of the hybrids that we want to be utilizing. And then on top of that, he also has a really nice inheritable ability where during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 2,000 DP, and then while this Digimon has 10,000 DP or more, then this Digimon gains security attack plus 1. So his inheritable ability is basically doing everything Red has been doing, where it's just DP boosting and increasing the overall damage output that the card could be doing, making Takuya just a very good tamer to be playing for the deck that he's going to be going into. And then on top of all of that, he's just a tamer that also can be hard played for 3, so it's just a good card to be utilizing all around. Next up, we have Tommy. So Tommy is following in some very similar patterns that Takuya is playing around with, where they just moved his security ability to the top half of the card instead of the bottom half of the card. He's a blue tamer that costs 3 to hard play, so I'm guessing that all of the others are just going to be their respective colors that cost 3, have a security ability, and then have an ability native to them, and then have a inheritable ability. So what Tommy's native ability is it's an on-play ability where you get to trash the bottom 3 Digivolution sources on one of the opponent's Digimon. So this is pretty okay. We know that Blue's been playing around with trashing the inheritable sources, so it's not like it's the worst ability in the world. But what's really good about the card is his inheritable ability, where it's a when attacking ability once per turn, one of the opponent's Digimon can't attack or block until the end of the opponent's next turn. So having the ability to essentially stunlock one of the opponent's Digimon is just very, very powerful because it makes whatever Digimon you want borderline unblockable if they have one blocker on the field, or it locks them out of utilizing their Mega or other Digimon on the field from doing anything, so it allows you to aggress that much easier onto the opponent and stop a lot of potential aggression from them onto you. So Tommy is looking to be a really good tamer to be utilizing for his inheritable. And we already know that blue is going to have lots of hybrids to be utilizing this ability with, just because Tommy's probably going to be getting his own stuff on top of all of the Lobomon stuff we currently already have, and that is coming in the set as well. Next up, we have Coda. So Coda is going to be the black tamer of the set, and while it is unfortunate that we're not going to be getting a black tamer to interact with hybrids, it's still nice that we're getting Coda, considering the type of deck Coda is going into is going to be really interesting and fun to be playing around with. So what Coda is doing for that deck is he is going to be that deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer. So if your memory is ever less than 3, then he'll always hard set it to 3. And on top of that, he has a nice on-play ability where you get to check the top 4 cards of your deck, add 1 Digimon with X-Antibody in its type among them into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in any order. So if you are building a X-Antibody type deck, then he is just adding to the overall consistency of that deck, and black isn't necessarily known for having the most consistent of tools, so if Davis is really good for blue, then Coda should be really good for the X-Antibody type deck, considering we have a couple of X-Antibody type Digimon already in the game, and we're going to be getting more within the set, and probably more in the future as well. So who's to say Coda won't get even better later on down the line when there's more X-Antibody type Digimon. So I really like what this card is doing, and I think he's going to be a pretty fun tamer to be playing around with in that X-Antibody deck. Next up, we have Gigastorm. So Gigastorm is a 7-costed red option with the main ability to delete up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon with 8,000 DP or less. So this is just another really good red removal type card. I really wish they would stop printing these types of cards because it also has the security ability of activating its main, thus allowing you to use it for free, thus facilitating security control, thus making it a really problematic card to be playing around with because, you know, we already have so much removal. What's more removal on top of all of the removal we already had to add to a heavy removal type deck, and all of this removal is warping and shaping the game. So while I do think this card is very, very powerful, I really wish they would stop printing these types of cards because we already have so much removal in the game. We really don't need any more, let alone good removal cards like this, adding to the overall power and consistency of something like security control, thus making it even more of a problem than it should be. Like, is there actually a problem with it changing its security ability to not activate its main? Is it too much to ask for you to start utilizing different types of security abilities to, let's say, add this card to the hand, do half of whatever the main ability is doing, or just to do something entirely different from the security? Like, why does it always have to be activating its main effect? So I really just don't understand because it's just adding more cards to the problem, and like, I don't know if they understand how much of a problem it is, if it even is that big of a problem, but regardless, we don't need more cards like this added to the game, and I really wish you would change up the security ability because that's where the majority of the problem is coming from, is what its security ability is. And then the last card that I'm going to be talking about in today's video is going to be a Pride Memory Boost. So this is a new memory boost for black, and it costs 4 to hard play, and has the really powerful main ability where you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you get to play 1 black Digimon with a play cost of 4 or less among them for free, and then you get to trash the rest. So black is interacting with the fact that they want certain cards in their trash, and this is a really good card at facilitating that, while also being able to play a Digimon off of the top of your deck. So that's looking to be really, really powerful for a whole bunch of black decks to be utilizing. So you could utilize this with the Machinedramon deck to just try to help fill up your trash and play your low levels for free. Well, I mean, it's not really for free because you paid 4 for the option, or you could utilize this in something like Commandramon to try to fill up the trash and play Commandramon for free. And then you could utilize this with just a whole bunch of other different decks to just try to play something for free, like a Mechanorimon, and then the rest go into the trash, and you also are setting up its delay, so it's just looking to be a very good card to be utilizing for black, and on top of which it also has the security ability, where you basically get to set up its delay ability to just gain the 2 memory when you feel like you need to. I really like what this card is doing, and this card seems like it's something really needed for black, because black it wasn't necessarily the most efficient of colors before, and this helps with its overall efficiency. As just a side note, I really hope they do make the 7 deadly sins into memory boosts, considering we do have technically 7 colors. So each color could get a memory boost, and then white could also get a memory boost too, and that would be really interesting. I don't know if they're actually going to go through with that, but that's just my first initial thought when I read that the translation was Pride Memory Boost. I don't know if that's what the official translation is actually going to end up being, but that's just a really fun idea for them to be playing around with. But as of right now, it looks like BT07 is going to be a pretty fun set to be playing around with, considering it's doing a lot to upgrade a lot of older decks, and there's a lot of old cards that could be played with a lot of the new cards, and it looks like there's going to be a whole bunch of new decks spawning from the set as well, so it'll be exciting to see how everything plays out and what other cards we're going to be getting and what other new support and synergies are going to be forming, all because of this new set. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you do want to support me in the channel, I do have a TCG Player affiliate link down in the description below. So whenever you buy cards off of a TCG Player using that link, some of the money will go to help supporting me in the channel. And on top of that, I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook. So if you want to buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me in the channel. And as always, thank you everyone for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.